What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Shelves. This is going to be a shorter episode than normal because there was a lot of shitty releases this month, so I didn't buy a whole lot. Starting off with a movie that I did not end up buying. I usually start off with those. Swiss Army Man. This was a movie that, from the trailer, you knew this was going to be something very unique and unlike anything we've ever seen before. It stars Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe. Paul Dano is basically this guy who is living on some island that looks deserted, and he's about to kill himself at the very beginning of the movie. Sees Daniel Radcliffe's dead body washed up on shore, walks over to him, and from that moment until the end of this movie, it is like the weirdest, craziest, most figurative, wild adventure you're going to go on. Basically, it's a farting corpse, and every single thing that he needs to do to get off this island, he can use Daniel Radcliffe's corpse for. You can stick a little grappling hook in his mouth and launch it. He pumps water through his system. He uses his farts as a little propeller to get off of the island, and just craziness. But the story underlying all of that weirdness is basically him trying to teach a dead body what it's like to be alive and what it's like to be human. And in a way, it's a very figurative movie. It's not a movie you're going to figure out on your first watch, and it's definitely not a movie that you can take literal. It's basically about Paul Dano trying to regain his humanity and kind of find his reason for living through teaching this corpse. And I enjoyed the hell out of this movie until the very end. It was one of the most unique things ever, which is always a breath of fresh air in a time where we get a lot of the same old. So I was picking up on all the little symbolism and all the figurativeness in this movie and all the underlying messages, and I was enjoying it. It was very fun and enjoyable. It was really goofy and offbeat. But when I got to the ending, and this is what I always fear when I watch movies like this that's really unique and off the wall and more of an independent film, they always have to go for an ending that you don't really get a clear answer for what's going on. And it's one of those endings. As soon as it got to the point where he meets up with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's this girl that he kind of fascinates over throughout the movie, from that point until the end, I kind of lost all my grip on what the story was and where it was going. Until this day, I've read articles, I've watched videos trying to explain what's going on, and it still doesn't make sense to me. So for that reason alone, I decided not to buy this movie, because it's a movie that I enjoyed watching once. It's not a movie that I would go back and watch again. Had it had a really memorable ending, or a really, an ending that kind of closes off the story and answers a few questions, I would have enjoyed it more. But the fact that the last 5 to 10 minutes of this movie just opened up that question mark to an ungodly size, it kind of frustrated me a little bit. So if you want to check out Swiss Army Man, it's definitely worth a watch, but check it out on Netflix. Now, starting off with the first release that I have bought, X-Men Apocalypse. Now, you guys already know, if you've watched my ranking of the comic book films of 2016, what my overall thoughts are for this, so I'll try to keep it short. But basically, this was a giant promise as a huge, awesome follow-up to Days of Future Past after Bryan Singer returned to the franchise that he pretty much put on the map. And this movie was basically bringing the X-Men's biggest, most famous villain to the screen, and it delivered on everything except for that villain, for the most part. The Magneto storyline was really emotional in this. I think Michael Fassbender did better with his acting in this movie than he did in the previous two. James McAvoy was great once again. I loved all the new cast for the original X-Men, like Cyclops and Jean Grey, especially Nightcrawler. The casting was spot on with all of them. Quicksilver was awesome yet again. His scene is arguably better in this one than in Days of Future Past, his little slow motion scene. And as far as the negatives, like I said, Apocalypse ended up being kind of a generic villain by the end. He's just one of those villains that I'm evil because I want to do evil things. And it wasn't really a really deep character when it really should have been, and he wasn't as intimidating as he should have been. The other biggest misstep in this movie is Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. I did not care for her at all in First Class. You could tell that she just didn't fit. She was on there because she was a big name, but it was more of the writing, hey, we were thinking, and you should be Magneto, and you should be Professor X, and you should be this, and the scenes like that were really cringeworthy. Mutant and proud. But Days of Future Past, I felt like she really owned that role. I'm one of the few, but I actually liked what she did in that movie. She was more like the Rebecca Romijn Mystique, and I liked her. And then in this movie, she backslid back even worse than she was in First Class. This movie, you could tell she does not give a shit about playing Mystique. She does not want to wear the makeup. She doesn't care about what's going on in the story. She doesn't want to be in another one of these movies. And she drags this movie down so much because they decide to put so much of the story on Mystique in this trilogy of movies. Like, she's the main character, and Mystique is always a secondary character. So I hope they get away from that. You know, there's the big X-Men, or the X-Men franchise is a big question mark right now, because you don't know if they're going to continue with this cast or if they're just going to focus all their attention on the Deadpool and the X-Force stuff, because there's just so many moving parts with that whole thing. But if they do continue with this cast, I hope they either downscale her role a lot or just let her out of her contract and let her go and do, you know, more Hunger Games movies or something. You know, just do something that you're actually going to try in, because you're getting paid out the ass to be in these movies and you don't care. But as far as my rating for this, almost forgot. This is definitely a go out and buy it. Even though it does have flaws, I like this movie a lot more than a lot of people. I still think it's enjoyable as hell. I just rewatched it the other day, and I enjoyed it just as much as I did in the theaters. It's a lot of fun. It's a good follow-up to Days of Future Past. It's not a great follow-up, but it's a lot of fun. It's a good addition to your collection, so go out and buy this one. After that, we have The Purge Election Year. Now, I was not a huge fan of the first Purge, but I did not hate on it as much as everybody else. I thought it was a decent little bottle horror thriller. Now, when The Purge Anarchy came out, I didn't have a whole lot of hope for it because it changed everything. It was a whole new cast. They didn't really acknowledge the events of the first one. You could tell it was more of a reboot than a sequel. And being that it was such a soon reboot, I was like, we'll see. And when I finally watched The Purge Anarchy, I loved it. That was like a John Carpenter movie set in the Purge universe. And this one is following along with that style, and it also carries over Frank Grillo's character from the second one. Now, this one I did not enjoy as much as Anarchy, but I did enjoy it more than The Purge, because it's still, like I said, it follows through with the tone and the style of Anarchy. And this is basically following Frank Grillo's character is now like a Secret Service agent. He's protecting this new senator, and she's played by Elizabeth Mitchell. And she is a senator who is trying to get rid of the Purge. So there's all these, you know, the founding fathers of America are trying to get her killed on Purge night so that she will not get elected and will not try to get rid of the Purge. And the movie's basically about him trying to protect her from all the crazy shit that's going on in Purge night. It's bloody in a few spots. It's not as entertaining as Anarchy. It's not as a surprise as Anarchy, but Frank Grillo's great as always. Elizabeth Mitchell's an actress that I always like seeing. And I like all the imagery you get in this, like all the different masks. Like this is like the new Halloween costumes that you see every single year. I can't tell you how many Purge election year costumes I saw this year. So this is an entertaining little horror action movie. Not quite as good as Anarchy. Give it a shot for Netflix. Now moving on. Is this going to be? No. Moving on to Bloodfather. Now, you guys who have seen my review know my thoughts on this movie as well. I'm a huge Mel Gibson fan. You know, I try to separate my thoughts about the person versus my thoughts on the actor or the director to a degree. You know, after a while you can't, but you know, Mel Gibson's one of those guys that I always love his work as an actor. I always love his work as a director. And this was such an awesome return to form for Mel Gibson. This was a story of Mel Gibson playing this kind of ex-alcoholic, ex-junkie, ex-con father. Erin Moriarty plays his daughter. She gets into some trouble with the Mexican cartel, tracks him down, and asks for his help. And he's basically trying to help his daughter escape from the drug cartel. This is a bloody, gritty thriller drama with some action scenes in it. This was marketed as an action movie, but it's not an action movie. It's a thriller drama with some action scenes, and some really good action scenes at that, especially if you're a Mad Max fan. This was a really gritty surprise because Mel Gibson this is one of the best performances that Mel Gibson has ever been, and he is just such a dark character in this, yet you love him and he's charming, and you're infatuated with his progression in the story, just like you are with every other role that Mel Gibson plays. That's why he's so damn good. He's a junkie, ex-con, alcoholic, and you want him to win. William H. Macy's got a small role in this that's good. Michael Parks has a phenomenal scene that guy is this. Whenever he shows up, he just owns the screen. It doesn't matter who the hell is on the screen with him. Diego Luna turns in a really surprising performance in this. But if you have not seen Bloodfather, this was a limited release. This is worth every single penny. So go out and buy this because, like, especially if you're a Mel Gibson fan, this is such a love letter to all the roles that he used to do that you know and love. But it's a lot darker and a lot grittier than a lot of his roles. Love this movie. Check it out. Go out and buy it. Moving on to The Infiltrator. Now, this is supposed to be based on a true story. I don't know how loosely it's based or how factual it is. Of Robert Mazur, who's played by Bryan Cranston, Heisenberg, my boy. And he basically goes undercover to infiltrate Pablo Escobar's drug ring and bring him down. And this movie is, if you're a Breaking Bad fan, you have a lot to enjoy here because this is a similar yet opposite character of Heisenberg. This is like somebody trying to infiltrate Heisenberg's drug kingpin, but it's played by Heisenberg. It's confusing, but that's how it is to me when I watch this. It's a really well-made movie. It goes on a little bit too long because it does follow, after about the hour and a half mark, it starts to follow kind of the same beats of a lot of these movies that you've seen before of somebody trying to infiltrate some kind of a crime ring. A lot of the supporting cast is really good. Diane Kruger plays his kind of undercover wife. They have a lot of really good chemistry. John Leguizamo's got a great role in this. That guy is starting to really pick some great roles. He's been around forever, but he was also kind of like those good actors who turn in bad performances. And the last 3 or 4 movies I've seen that guy in, he's just knocked it out of the park. And you also have Benjamin Bratt in this as kind of like the criminal that Bryan Cranston eventually befriends. And this is a terrific movie to watch if you're a Breaking Bad fan. If you're not a Breaking Bad fan, I think this is going to fall into the mediocre scale for a lot of people because this is a very stock infiltrating a crime ring movie. So I'm going to say check it out on Netflix because I enjoyed this movie a lot, but that's because I'm a Bryan Cranston whore. And I think everybody else is probably going to, like I said, tip this towards the mediocre scale. So check this out on Netflix. Moving on from that is an older movie, but it's a movie that I've always enjoyed. And October Sky is now on Blu-ray. Now this is a movie that tells the true story of Homer Hickam and his 3 friends. And these are 3 boys in this coal town in West Virginia in the 1950s. Where Sputnik gets launched, and Homer Hickam, seeing Sputnik in the sky, is suddenly inspired. He wants to go into space, and now that's, he's like the popular kid, and now all of a sudden he's trying to hang out with the geeks to learn rocket science and calculus. And this is a really good period piece movie. The 50s have a lot of charm, and the charm carries through on this. There's got a great soundtrack. It has a little bit, and I say a little bit because it's not that type of movie at all, but a little bit of the feeling of the Goonies or Stand By Me kind of underlying the movie. And you got Chris Cooper playing his kind of hard-ass father that won't take any shit, and he wants him to be a coal miner, and he does a great job in this movie of being kind of that dickhead father who wants the right thing but just can't quite say it the way that you need it to be said. His teacher is Laura Dern, and she's really sweet in this. She's the one who's kind of championing him to follow his dreams. This is a really good, true story, and kind of a neat little story too, because I had to read this in grade school. October Sky is based off of a book called Rocket Boys, because that's what they were called, the Rocket Boys. And when they were trying to think of a name for the movie, because they knew nobody was going to go see a movie titled Rocket Boys, they stuck the word Rocket Boys into an anagram machine. It switched up all the letters and came out October Sky. So just a neat little piece of trivia there. But this movie is a lot of fun. It's a cheap little buy because it's an older movie. Definitely go out and buy this. It's a lot of fun. A good little period piece. If you like Stand By Me and movies like that, I think you'll enjoy this. Now moving on to the bombshell. Alright, so Paul Feig's Ghostbusters. If you listen to mine and Holly's audio review of this back when I was doing my podcast, and it is on my YouTube channel if you want to go and check it out, you're probably asking yourself, why the fuck did you go out and buy this thing? Because you said it was bad and you said to skip it. Well, if you remember that, you will also remember that my girlfriend absolutely loved this because she's a Melissa McCarthy fanatic, so that is why this is a part of my collection. Now, as far as my thoughts on Paul Feig's Ghostbusters, this was probably the most controversial piece of art that has come out this year. And somewhat deservedly so, and somewhat was just blown way out of proportion. I never thought that we needed a remake to Ghostbusters. I think the majority of the people who loved the original thought the same thing. It's one of those properties that, it should have been rebooted, or it would have been rebooted a long time ago. But Bill Murray kind of played his power hand with this series because he knew that they were not going to do a sequel or a remake without involving him somehow. So he pretty much made them wait around until he was ready. And I think after the death of Harold Ramis, he decided he might as well not play games with it anymore. So he decided to help them along with this. Now, Paul Feig is a director that everybody loves except for me. I did not like Bridesmaids very much. I did not like The Heat very much. I enjoyed Spy for the most part, but I enjoyed it because of Jason Statham. His role being kind of the opposite of his typical roles, being kind of a dumbass that screws everything up, I was on the floor dying with that. So had he not been in the movie, it would have been stacked right alongside Bridesmaids for me. So I wasn't enthused about the director choice for this. I never had a problem with the female-led reboot, although I think that Hollywood is starting to get a little bit too crazy with the whole female-led concept. Now we got an Ocean's 11 with all females, and just, to me, if you're going to have female-led franchises, start your own so that you have the credit of starting your own thing and owning your own thing. Otherwise, you are inevitably going to be compared to the original that is a male-led cast, like this one was. Now, getting beyond all that, this is not a good movie. It is not a funny movie. It is not a well-made movie. Anybody that says it is afraid that people are going to call them sexist. And I'm not afraid. You can call me whatever you want, because I am not sexist. And that's one of the things that pissed me off about this movie that I'll get into in a minute, was kind of that whole sexism card that kept playing. This is not a well-written movie at all. This is a movie that had a very bare-bones version of a reboot script, and they relied on the majority of the story coming from its 4 lead actresses coming up with improv little sketch comedy to carry the movie along. And you can tell when you watch it. This is a movie that they probably filmed 3 times the runtime of this movie in different takes and different improvised sketches, and then when they got to the editing room, they just chose which ones they thought worked the best. And you can tell when you watch this movie. Leslie Jones is somebody I've never heard of before. She was very funny for the most part in this, but then she becomes a stereotypical loud New Yorker. And Kristen Wiig is okay. Melissa McCarthy is okay. I could not stand Kate McKinnon's character in this. Now, she's kind of a polarizing character because some people say that's their favorite character in this movie, and the other half of the world decides that she is the worst part of the movie, and I'm part of that half. She was just in a completely different movie. Even in the scenes that were somewhat working, she was in the background like making weird faces, and it was so distracting and so over the top and so unnecessary that it just aggravated me the whole movie. Chris Hemsworth was probably the one part of this movie that I did enjoy at times, but that leads me into my main problem with this movie. And I'm not somebody that gets easily offended, so I'm not going to even say that this movie offended me, but it's something that kind of pissed me off a little bit while I was watching it. They made this whole deal about, if you're a misogynist, sexist, if you don't appreciate this movie, or you don't support this movie, or you don't believe in this movie. And yet every single male character they have in this movie is either an asshole, a dumbass, or the villain. Chris Hemsworth is so over the top fucking retarded that it is insulting. It's funny to a point, and after that it's just digging into you like they're saying that guys are stupid. Then you have the mayor, and he is such a dick that's the other male character that you have. And then you have the villain played by a male. And the way, spoiler alert somewhat, the way they defeat the villain is by shooting him in the dick. So how can you have a movie that you're trying to tell me is, against sexism, and then you're going to portray all your male characters like that? So that was the main negative with me. But again, when I was watching this, I wasn't laughing. I remember giggling twice. There was a scene with Leslie Jones when she's chased by a skeleton that I giggled at, and there was one other part that I giggled at. Everything else was just monotone. It wasn't funny. The cameos in this movie are god awful. Bill Murray is so wasted in this. Dan Aykroyd shows up for one scene to deliver one line, and it is so badly delivered that it is just facepalm moment. And then you get Ernie Hudson that shows up at the very end, and it It was to the point where you're trying to separate yourself from Ghostbusters, the original, and yet you're reminding us about the better movie every 15 minutes. There is a Ghostbusters reference or a song or a picture in the background or a cameo literally every 10 to 15 minutes in this movie. So they're just beating you over the head. Hey, remember that movie in the 80s that you love that's way better than this piece of shit? So absolutely skip this one. This is a fuck you almost, to the point where if it wasn't for the fact that there was some good parts in this and you could tell that they had the potential to be good, this would be a fuck this movie. But I'm being nice by giving it a skip it. Rant over. Now moving on to another older movie that is finally on Blu-ray. Stephen King's It. Now this is a movie that I grew up with, and I think I've said this on my podcast numerous times. If you are a fan and used to listen to me on that, there's only 2 times I can remember ever being scared by a horror movie as a kid. You know, I grew up watching horror movies all the time. I went to sleep watching Freddy. I watched Chucky all the time. Michael Myers, Halloween. No horror movie ever really affected me by scaring me. It was always entertainment for me. The 2 times I remember being genuinely scared was that fucked up sister in Pet Sematary, Zelda, Rachel, that witch, and Stephen King's It, Pennywise. The first time I watched this movie, that same night, I had a nightmare that Pennywise was chasing me around a grocery store. That's a true story. So this movie has always had kind of a special place in my heart. I know that kind of sounds fucked up, being that it scared me, but I loved it that much because it was the only movie that scared me, so I constantly went back and rewatched it. Now, watching it again as an adult, I still hail this as a classic. However, this is one of those classics that is prime for a remake because, in all honesty, this movie is not that good. The main thing that drives this movie and makes it a classic is Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise. And the first half of the movie with the kids, that whole Stand By Me Goonies thing that I was talking about with October Sky, it's similar, and it's in this too. And that is the heart of this movie, is the first half. The second half with the adults is not as good. However, this is still a classic. This is still a movie that, now that it's finally on Blu-ray, you should absolutely go out and add it to your collection. If you've never seen it before, definitely go give it a shot, because this is a movie that I think is timeless for what you will get out of it. And it's still frightening to this day, the things that Pennywise does. I'm hoping this remake comes out really good because this is a movie that is prime for a remake. You can improve on this movie very easily by improving the adult side, getting rid of that stupid-ass spider, and continuing a performance of Pennywise that's different from Tim Curry's but equally as terrifying. So, fingers crossed that that thing comes out good. But this movie is a classic, a flawed classic, but a classic nonetheless. Go out and buy it. Moving on from that is another horror movie. Now this was probably my second most anticipated horror movie of this year behind The Conjuring 2, and that's the Lights Out. Now this was directed by David F. Sandberg. Now he had the short Lights Out. Now after you get done watching this video, if you've never seen it, search on YouTube, Lights Out short film. It's only like 1.5 minutes long, maybe 2 minutes. And turn the lights off, put it on surround sound, or put it on the TV, or hold your phone really close to you, or get under a blanket. Something to create that scary atmosphere, and watch that short, and tell me that that shit is not some of the scariest 2 minutes that you've ever seen. Now, they expanded the story of that whole Lights Out concept from his short film into this little horror movie here. He comes back to direct it. And this guy is kind of taken under James Wan's wing. I guarantee you're going to see him take over a lot of James Wan's properties, much like Leigh Whannell took over for Insidious. He's probably going to direct Conjuring 3, or he'll direct the little spin-off movie with the nun. You mark my words. This is a really well-directed horror movie. It trims all the fat. There's no bullshit side stories or side characters. It sticks to the point, and it's a very simple yet terrifying concept about a monster that lives in the dark, and the only way you can escape it is by keeping a light on. And it preys on that timeless fear of the dark. The monster is really scary looking until the scene that it does. There's one little moment where you get to see it in the light and see what it looks like, which kind of ruined it a little bit for me. But when it's just the silhouette, it's terrifying. The acting is really good in this. Maria Bello is probably the only real big actress that's in this, but you got Teresa Palmer, Gabriel Bateman. If he's the boyfriend, watch this movie and tell me that guy doesn't look like Edgar Ramirez and Jai Courtney had a love child, because that guy looks exactly like both of those guys. Basically, this tells a story. It's a very simple concept. There's a monster that comes after you in the dark. Maria Bello has some kind of a connection with this monster in her past, and her kids are trying to escape it. That's all I'm going to tell you about it, so that leaves some surprises there. My negative with this movie is I feel like the ending was a little bit rushed. They defeat the monster a little bit too quick. And even though they execute the scares really, really well, if you have not seen the trailer, stay away from the trailer, because the trailer gives away some of the more terrifying moments in this. But this is a really good, well-directed, well-executed horror movie. It's a short, little, sweet surprise for this year, and it's probably my third favorite horror movie this year, behind Don't Breathe and The Conjuring 2. But absolutely go out and buy Lights Out if you're a horror fan. You'll enjoy it. Moving on from that is a movie that may not have come out this past month in October, but I just now found this online. This is a movie that I sing the praises for constantly. I own it on DVD, but I only own it on DVD because until I found this, I did not know that it even had a Blu-ray release. And this is actually a foreign Blu-ray, a Region B Blu-ray. But it gives me another chance to talk about this movie, to hopefully get some of you guys to watch this. And this is, I'm going to cheat a little bit because it may not have been released in October, but this is going to be my pick of the month. And that is Rudderless. This is the directorial debut of William H. Macy. It stars Billy Crudup. It stars the late Anton Yelchin, Lawrence Fishburne. And this movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is such an underrated, underseen, underappreciated movie that it sickens me that people have not seen this. And I guarantee all of you who are watching this have not seen this. This movie is so damn phenomenal to me. It basically tells a story. You have Billy Crudup, who's this big executive businessman. His son dies in a school shooting, the very beginning of the movie. 2 years later, he's just like this broken guy, does not care. He lives on a boat. He's lost all of his money. He doesn't live his life. He's just like a zombie, basically. And he comes across this box of demo CDs that his son recorded before he died. And he never realized his son was even a musician or wrote music or recorded music. So he goes through these music tapes or these CDs, learns all of his son's songs, and starts playing it in this bar that's owned by William H. Macy, and kind of playing the songs to kind of try to connect with his son. Inspires Anton Yelchin, who's a young musician, and they start to create a band, and they play his son's songs, but he doesn't tell them that that's his dead son's songs. He takes all the credit for them himself, like he wrote all of them. And this band starts to become really big in this town, and that's all I'm going to tell you. Because there's a lot of directions this movie takes that are really shocking and surprising. You would not expect from a movie of this caliber. And it's just, the music in this movie is phenomenal. It's a soundtrack that I own and I listen to constantly. The acting is top notch. This is the best you've ever seen Billy Crudup. He is funny and he is emotional. He goes from being this really cocky ad exec to being this broken man who is just lifeless, to suddenly being given life again by just being just intoxicated by getting to know his son through this music. Anton Yelchin, God, I miss that guy. And I get sad when I watch this movie now because I know he's no longer with us, because he is phenomenal in this too. He just plays that character that he's always so good at playing, just that real relatable, down-to-earth, sweet guy. Lawrence Fishburne's good as a side role as this music store owner. There's nothing more I can say to recommend this movie. It is a phenomenal movie start to finish. I cannot wait to see William H. Macy do something different. I never realized, or never would have expected that guy had something this good in him. This, for a directorial debut, this is phenomenal. Please, I implore you, please. The DVD is cheap. You can watch it on Amazon Instant Video for like $3 or $4, or you can go out and buy this Region Blu-ray if you really like the movie like I do. But I would, it's like $30 to get the Region one. So just stick to the Amazon Instant Video or the DVD if you've never seen it. That way you're not taking a huge risk. But I guarantee, if you just love film and if you love music, you're going to love this movie. This is just one of the most underrated, phenomenal movies that I've ever seen. My pick of the month, absolutely. Go out and buy this. Rudderless. Now moving on to the 2 TV shows that I have to talk about. One of them I do not have in front of me. I did buy it, but I let my father borrow it to watch it. And that's Preacher. Now, something I've been talking about a lot in this episode. If you listen to me on my podcast days, me and Holly gave a bi-weekly review of the first season of Preacher as we watched it. And this is a show that I was really anticipating because I have read 3 out of the 6 books of Preacher. I need to get back on it and finish them, but I just haven't had time to read lately. And the comic series is so incredible. It is so off the wall and unique and bizarre, and just tells the story of this preacher who gets the power of the Word of God. He can influence anybody to do whatever that he says. Like, if I told you, jump off a cliff, and they'll go jump off a cliff. And you have Cassidy as his best friend, who is a vampire. And already you can tell this is craziness. And he's basically going across the country to find God, to have him answer for the fact that he left heaven, because God basically just checked out and left it to the angels. And when the show came out, I was worried because it was, even though I liked their movies, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg aren't known for horror comedies. So I was a little bit worried of, okay, are they going to be able to nail the tone of Preacher, or is this going to be too comedic? I liked the casting. And when I watched this show, it took me about 3 episodes to realize it, but I believe they had about 4 to 5 episodes of story written, and were probably shocked that they got a full season order, so they stretched it over 10 episodes. The comic book is incredible, and I have faith that further seasons are going to be really good, or at least better, because the story of this first season is basically a prequel to the first issue of the comic, and it is really slow. It is really stretched out. There's so many episodes where you literally feel like nothing happened. And yet it's kind of hard to turn away from it. It's like a car wreck because it is so off the wall, bizarre, insane that you want to see it go somewhere. And you're very impatiently waiting for it to get there. And unfortunately, until season 2 gets here, I'm not going to be able to fully recommend it. I bought it because I'm a Preacher fan. I want to give it another watch. And when the season 2 comes out, I still have my fingers crossed that it's going to be really good. I will want to just go ahead and have the first season in my collection. But it's a really hard watch because there's an episode where some things happen, and then there's like 3 episodes where literally nothing happens. And then, there's about 2 or 3 episodes in this that are really, really good. And the rest of them really feel like filler. And it was really frustrating for me knowing the comic because I know how much great story they have in those books. Seasons worth of story. It's not like the comic book is so short that they have to stretch the story out and find ways to make multiple seasons out of this. You could have made one season out of the first 5 to 10 issues of this comic, and you still have hundreds of issues left. So, it was very confusing of a decision for me to make the first season a prequel, because everything that transpires in a nutshell in this 10-episode series happens in like the first 3 or 4 pages of the comic. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. So it was disappointing to me that, whenever I got 3 episodes in, I was like, please tell me they're not going to wait the whole season to blow up his church. And it was one of those things where I didn't know if they were going to go that direction. Maybe they're going to find another way. And, there's things that they take from later issues in the comics and put it into the story, but all the story, to a degree, is just a build-up to the first issue of the comic. And it was just a really strange decision. So I'm going to give it a watch on Netflix. A very unenthusiastic watch it on Netflix because I have a hard time believing that somebody who reads the comics is going to enjoy it, and I have a hard time believing that a lot of people who have not read the comics are going to be engaged enough to keep coming back to this. But now that it's available for you to watch all in succession instead of waiting week by week, it might be a little bit better. Some shows lend themselves to binging better than week to week. This might be one of them. So check it out on Netflix. Let me know what you think, and cross your fingers that season 2 brings us back to the amazing stories of the comic. Now moving on to I'll give this my other pick of the month because I kind of cheated with Rudderless. This is a show that is so underwatched, or was, because it's over now, was so underwatched and underrated that it was a crime, much like Rudderless, and that's Banshee. This is a Cinemax show that's 4 seasons long. This is the 4th and final season that was just released. They're 10-episode seasons. I believe this was either a 7 or 8 episode season, so it was a little bit shorter. And this tells the story of a convict who gets out of prison. He goes looking after his girlfriend, who he went on a heist with her, and that's the reason why he was locked up, is he let her escape and he took the fall for this diamond heist. So he goes after his girlfriend to get the diamonds back. She's not having it, so he takes the identity of this dead, soon-to-be elected sheriff in this town called Banshee, and he becomes the new sheriff of Banshee. That's the first episode. This show is like the best bloody, over-the-top, gritty, insane 90s action movie that you've ever seen over 4 seasons. The action scenes in this are just brutal and kick-ass. The character in this who goes unnamed, you can call him Sheriff Hood because that's the name he goes under, but his real name goes until the end of the series. You never know his real name. So Lucas Hood is one of the most badass TV characters ever. That guy is not scared of shit. He will walk into an ass beating happily. And it is just, this show is so phenomenally, just endlessly fun and insane and gritty, and will go in directions that you would never expect it to go into, and you're like, dude, they're not going to go that far, and they go even farther than you expected them to go with it. The villains are all awesome in this from every season. The main villain of Kai Proctor, who goes throughout this series, he's kind of like the more demented version of Boyd Crowder for you Justified fans out there. This show I cannot recommend enough. I believe it's either on Amazon Instant Video or Netflix. Don't quote me on it because they're constantly changing their shit up. But even if it's not, you could probably get the first season for like $15. Watch the first season. If you're not hooked by the first episode, then I don't know what to say about your taste in TV shows. But this show, to me, this is one of those shows that not only is every single episode so entertaining, there is no filler, and each episode stands on its own, like its own little 90s action movie, especially the first season. And not only that, each successive season kind of reinvents the show in its own way, in the way that I've never seen a show do. Season 1 is very unlike Season 2, which is very unlike Season 3, which is very unlike Season 4. And for a show to be able to do that, to keep its underlying story and its underlying characters, but continue to reinvent itself every season to keep everything fresh and new and shocking, is awesome. So definitely go out. I would recommend buying all 4 seasons and just watching all of them, but at least go out and buy the first season. And especially if you've watched the first 3 seasons, you haven't seen the final season yet, definitely go out and check this out because it's a great ending to the series. It's a great little short final season. Everything gets wrapped up really, really well. And it reinvents itself in a really cool way. It kind of becomes more of like a murder mystery in this final season. So check out Banshee, guys. Go out and buy it. All right. Well, that was my short little sweet October Off the Shelves episode. Put all your comments below on all of these titles if you have seen them. If you have not seen them, which ones you want to check out. And like I said, please go out and check out Rudderless. I cannot ask you any nicer. Please go out and check that movie out. Do it as a favor to me. As stupid as that sounds, go and watch Rudderless. Put all your comments below, guys. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button. That way you get to come back and see me next time. But if that's not soon enough to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.